Picture this. The year is 1730. A treasure hunter named William Guest finds a piece of parchment with strange symbols in a dead pirate's chest. He laughs at the warning written in blood. 7 days later, his ship is found drifting with no crew aboard. Only William remains, dead, his face frozen in absolute terror. His hair turned completely white. This isn't a Hollywood story. This really happened, and it's just one of many pirate curses that destroyed the lives of those who ignored them. Today, we're diving into the dark world of pirate superstitions, curses, and the black spot. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented cases where pirate curses seem to actually work. Before we begin, let me be clear. I'm not saying magic is real, but I am saying that throughout history, certain pirate treasures and artifacts have been followed by death, madness, and tragedy. Coincidence? Maybe. But when the same pattern repeats dozens of times, even skeptics start to wonder. Pirates were among the most superstitious people who ever lived, and for good reason. When you're sailing wooden ships through hurricane seasons, fighting battles where one cannonball could end everything, you start believing in fate, luck, and yes, curses. The black spot wasn't just fiction from Treasure Island. Real pirates used it. Real people died after receiving it, and real treasures remain hidden because everyone who gets close to finding them meets a terrible end. Let's start with the most famous cursed treasure of all time, one that has killed at least 7 people and continues to claim victims to this day. In 1795, a teenager named Daniel McGinnis noticed strange lights coming from Oak Island in Nova Scotia. The next day, he found a circular depression in the ground, like something had been buried there. Daniel and 2 friends started digging. At 2 feet, they hit flagstones. At 10 feet, they found a platform of oak logs. At 20 feet, another platform. At 30 feet, another. Someone had gone to incredible effort to hide something deep underground. But here's where it gets dark. At 90 feet, they found a stone with strange symbols. When translated, it read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. But the same stone carried another message, a curse. 7 must die before the treasure is found. The boys had to stop digging when the pit flooded, but others continued their work. In 1861, a company dug deeper. The pit collapsed. 1 man died. In 1897, another group tried. A worker fell to his death. In 1909, another death. 1951, another. 1959, 2 more died when their shaft collapsed. That's 6 deaths. The curse said 7 must die. But wait, it gets stranger. Every group that got close to the treasure reported the same things. Tools that mysteriously broke, compasses that spun wildly, and worst of all, voices. Voices coming from deep underground, speaking in languages no one recognized. In 1970, a team finally reached what they believed was the treasure vault. They lowered a camera. The footage showed what looked like chests and human remains. But before they could retrieve anything, the shaft flooded again, this time with water that seemed to come from nowhere. Modern teams have spent millions trying to crack Oak Island's secret. They've found Templar crosses, ancient parchments, and pieces of gold chain. But the treasure itself remains hidden, and everyone's waiting for the 7th death. Because according to the curse, that's when the treasure will finally reveal itself. Some say the treasure belongs to Captain Kidd. Others claim it's Blackbeard's hoard. But whoever put it there, they protected it with something more than just engineering. They protected it with fear itself. Olivier Levasseur, known as La Buse, or the Buzzard, was about to be hanged. It was July 7th, 1730, on Reunion Island. As the noose was placed around his neck, he threw a piece of parchment into the crowd. His last words were, "Find my treasure, he who can understand this." The parchment contained 17 lines of cryptic symbols, a cryptogram that supposedly revealed the location of the greatest pirate treasure ever assembled. We're talking about loot worth over $4 billion in today's money. But La Buse didn't just hide his treasure, he cursed it. The first to seriously try was a man named Charles de la Roncière in 1934. He claimed to have partially decoded the message. It led him to the Seychelles Islands. He found pirate markings on rocks, hidden caves, and what he believed were clues left by La Buse. But then strange things started happening. His workers reported seeing a figure watching them from the cliffs. A figure dressed in old pirate clothing that would vanish when approached. Tools would disappear and reappear in impossible places. And then came the accidents. 3 workers died in cave-ins that seemed to happen for no reason. De la Roncière himself became obsessed. spending every penny he had. He died bankrupt and insane, claiming Buse visited him in his dreams. In 1949, Reginald Cruz Wilkins took up the search. He spent 27 years looking for the treasure. He actually found carved rocks that seemed to tell the story of the labors of Hercules, each labor representing a step toward the treasure. But for every discovery, there was a setback. Floods that happened on clear days, excavated tunnels that would refill with sand overnight, and always, the feeling of being watched. Reginald's son John continued the search after his father's death. He reported finding underground caverns with pirate graffiti and flood tunnels similar to Oak Island. But in 2018, while exploring a promising site, John had a heart attack. He survived, but took it as a final warning. Here's the truly creepy part. Every person who seriously hunted Buse's treasure reports the same dream. They see a man with a scarred face, missing one eye, standing over a massive pile of gold. He says nothing, but holds up his hand with fingers extended. When asked what it means, researchers believe he's counting the number of people who must die before his treasure can be claimed. So far, 17 people have died searching for Buse's treasure. How many more will it take? The cryptogram remains mostly unsolved. It sits in museums, on websites, challenging anyone brave enough or foolish enough to try. Now let's talk about the black spot itself. Robert Louis Stevenson didn't invent it for Treasure Island. He took it from real pirate history. The black spot was a death sentence. Pirates would cut a circular piece from a Bible, blacken one side with ash or tar, and deliver it to someone marked for death. Receiving the black spot meant you had days, sometimes hours, to live. But here's what most people don't know. The black spot wasn't just a threat. Pirates believed it carried actual supernatural power. The act of cutting a Bible was sacrilege. It invited damnation, and that damnation could be transferred to another person. In 1718, a pirate named William Fly gave a black spot to a merchant captain who had refused to surrender his cargo. The captain laughed it off. 3 days later, his ship was struck by lightning on a clear day. The captain was the only casualty. In 1721, Bartholomew Roberts' crew used the black spot on one of their own, a pirate named Thomas Jones who'd been caught stealing from the common plunder. Jones threw the spot into the sea and fled to shore. Within a week, he was found dead in a tavern. No wounds, no poison. The locals said he simply stopped living. But the most terrifying black spot story comes from 1723. A pirate crew captured a British Navy officer named Lieutenant Maynard. Instead of killing him, they gave him a black spot and released him, saying the curse would do their work for them. Maynard made it back to port and reported the incident. He seemed fine for exactly 13 days. Then, according to multiple witnesses, he began aging rapidly. His hair went gray, then white. His skin wrinkled. His teeth fell out. In the span of 3 days, he aged 50 years. Doctors couldn't explain it. He died looking like an ancient man, though he was only 32. The British Navy took the black spot seriously after that. Official records show that sailors who received black spots were given leave from duty and often received last rites from chaplains. Because whether the curse was real or psychological, people who got the black spot had a tendency to die. Modern historians argue it was fear that killed them, the power of suggestion. But that doesn't explain the physically impossible deaths, the aging, the spontaneous combustion, the men found dead in locked rooms with expressions of absolute terror. William Kidd wasn't supposed to be a pirate. He was hired by the British government to hunt pirates. But in 1698, he crossed the line and became one himself. When he was finally captured and hanged in 1701, he took the location of his treasure to the grave. Or did he? Before his execution, Kidd supposedly cursed his treasure with these words: "My gold will do no good to any man. It will turn to blood in his hands." In 1894, a group of treasure hunters found what they believed was part of Kidd's treasure on Deer Island in Maine. 4 wooden chests filled with gold coins. The men should have been rich. Instead, within 1 year, all 5 were dead. 1 drowned in calm waters. 1 fell from a cliff on a clear day. 1 was killed by a horse. 1 died from a disease no doctor could identify. The last one was found with his throat cut, though the knife was in his hand. Murder or suicide? No one knows. The gold vanished. Some say it was stolen. Others say it returned to wherever it came from. In 1950, Another portion of kids' treasure was allegedly found on Gardiner's Island in New York. The finder was a lawyer named Hubert Palmer. He discovered old Spanish gold coins in a cave while hiking. He took 3 coins as souvenirs. Within a month, Palmer's house burned down. He lost everything except those 3 coins, which were found untouched in the ashes. He moved in with his brother. 2 weeks later, that house burned down too. Again, the coins survived. Palmer threw them into the ocean. The next day, he found them in his coat pocket. Palmer eventually donated the coins to a museum. The museum suffered a break-in where nothing was stolen except those 3 coins. They were found a week later in Palmer's grave. He had died of a heart attack the night of the museum break-in. He was 38 years old and had no history of heart problems. But the most disturbing kid treasure story happened in 2005. A professional treasure hunting company claimed to have located kids' flagship, the Adventure Galley, off the coast of Madagascar. They brought up cannons, coins, and what they believed was kids' personal chest. The chest was x-rayed before opening. Inside, they could see coins, jewelry, and what looked like documents. But when they opened it, in front of cameras and witnesses, the chest was full of blood. Human blood. Fresh blood. DNA testing showed it belonged to 5 different people, none of whom could be identified. The treasure hunting company went bankrupt within 6 months. 3 of its members died in separate accidents. The 4th disappeared. The 5th is in a psychiatric hospital, where he constantly talks about the captain who visits him at night. Everyone knows the legend of the Flying Dutchman, the ghost ship doomed to sail forever. But few know about the cursed treasure that supposedly caused the curse in the first place. Captain Hendrik van der Decken was a Dutch merchant who turned to piracy in the 1640s. According to legend, he stole a treasure from an Indian temple, a treasure that was protected by ancient curses. As he tried to sail around the Cape of Good Hope with his stolen gold, he swore an oath that he would make it around the Cape, even if it took until Judgment Day. The curse took him at his word. The ship vanished into a storm and became the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Over the centuries, pieces of the Dutchman's treasure have supposedly washed ashore, and everyone who's found them has met a terrible fate. In 1911, a South African beachcomber named Thomas King found a barnacle-covered chest containing gold coins unlike any he'd seen before. They had strange markings that hurt to look at. King became rich selling the coins, but every person who bought one reported the same thing. The coins would become burning hot at random times, and at night, they could hear the sound of waves and screaming coming from them. Within 2 years, every single person who owned one of those coins was dead. Shipwrecks, drownings. One man was found in the middle of the desert, lungs full of seawater. Thomas King himself disappeared. His house was found filled with sand and seaweed, despite being 20 miles from the ocean. In 1942, a German U-boat reported finding a derelict Dutch sailing ship. They boarded it and found chests of gold. They took the treasure aboard the submarine. 3 hours later, the U-boat sent a distress signal saying they were sinking, though they reported no damage and no enemy contact. The submarine was never found. In 2006, a diving team off Cape Town reported finding old Dutch coins in an underwater cave. They brought up 17 coins. That night, their boat was found drifting. The entire crew was missing. The coins were still there, but they were covered in fresh blood. Coast Guard reported that the blood was somehow still warm, hours after the crew vanished. So are pirate curses real? I can't answer that. What I can tell you is that certain treasures have a body count that defies explanation. Certain artifacts carry histories written in blood, and certain warnings from the past should maybe, just maybe, be taken seriously. The treasures I've talked about today are still out there. Buse's billions, Kids' gold, the Oak Island mystery. They're waiting, calling to the brave and the greedy. But before you grab your metal detector and head to the beach, ask yourself this: is any amount of gold worth joining the list of the cursed? Is any treasure worth becoming part of the legend yourself? The pirates who hid these treasures didn't just bury gold, they buried warnings. And history shows us, again and again, what happens to those who don't listen. The black spot might have been paper and ash, but the death that followed it was real. Sweet dreams, treasure hunters. And remember, some things are meant to stay buried.